friends, and welcome back to the PHLY Phillies podcast. I have missed you. I hope you have missed the Phillies content. I am super excited to get this thing started. Tyler Zula here, Andrew Frazier producing today's show. I am super lucky to have one of our best producers with me on this opening. I don't want to say maiden voyage because, you know, we've tinkered with the format a little bit. We've changed some things around, but I am super excited to be back and welcome into the PHLY Phillies podcast. For those that may not have seen the little sneak peek that we put together, let me give you a little bit of a rundown very quickly on what we're going to be doing here on the PHLY Phillies podcast, because it's a little bit different than your typical 5 days a week, 1 hour long podcast. So Mondays, we'll be with you live from 1 to 1:30. We'll do, as the season progresses, we'll do a little bit of a weekend recap. We'll talk about the games ahead. And then, of course, as of right now, we'll talk about the hypotheticals, spring training, who's going to be where, how good can this Phillies team be? And of course, we'll dive into all of the X's and O's, and we'll nerd out throughout the week. Friday, we'll go a little bit longer. We'll go an hour on Fridays. We'll go till 2. We'll talk to Jim Salisbury each and every Friday. And of course, we'll hang out with some of the best beat writers and content creators across Major League Baseball. And my goal is to, each week before a weekend series starts, talk to a beat writer or a content creator from the team that the Phillies are going to be playing to get a little bit of insight on some of the opposition. So I'm super excited for that. And then in the in-between, the interim, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we will be with you in short-form content, 8, 10, 12-minute pieces of information. We'll deep dive some stuff. Tomorrow, I'm super excited to talk about one pitcher in particular that may be new to the Phils. I don't want to spoil anything, but we will talk about that. We'll have some fun along the way with some of the other PHLY talent and producers with some trivia. And back in the day, as Andrew does the Rite Aid back in the day with the Anthony Gargano show, we'll do a little spin on that as well. I can't wait for this. I'm super excited. Thank you for everybody that's back with us once again. Before we get started, before we dive into today's Phillies content, I have to address the elephant in the room. I'm wearing a hoodie. Andrew's wearing a hoodie and a hat. Everybody you've seen is in green, Kelly green, midnight green, whatever this offset green color is. The Birds are Super Bowl champions. I want to talk about that for 90 seconds, and then we'll talk baseball. I talked about it on John's show today in the morning. Andrew talked about it with Anthony this afternoon. It hit me as I woke up this morning, and you could probably tell in my voice it's a little hoarse. I'm a fan just like you are. And what last night showed me was the Eagles are the dominant force, or can be a dominant force in the NFL for a really long time. It's a young defense. It's a young core. Jalen Hurts was poised. He was excellent. He was sharp. 5 incomplete passes the entire game, one of which was an interception. 40-22 didn't tell the stat line of what this game was. It could have been the 40-6 that it was at one point. I know we're going to talk baseball. I just had to get my 2 cents out there about how good the Eagles were last night. They were the superior team. Not just the superior team, but the dominant team from start to finish. Andrew, before we get into the baseball conversation, I want to get your thoughts on the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles are now 2-time Super Bowl champs.
2-time, man. It is a dream come true. You know, 52, Super Bowl 52, I never expected it to happen. It happened. We got that out of the way. We got the first one. I said it earlier today on Anthony's show. This was complete and utter dominance.
Domination from start to finish.
Domination on a team that has been on the pedestal of the NFL for years, you know, going for that three-peat. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Spags, all those guys, you know. And they just went in there. The Eagles just went in there, and they were there to play the game, man.
It was a business trip. That's all it was. It was a business trip all week.
They
were a beautiful sight.
They were not there. They were not there to F around, all right? They were there. They had the tie, the suit on, and they were ready to go, man. And just like you, I was driving in this morning. I stayed at my parents' house in Bucks County. So I had about an hour drive in, and I'm sitting in the car, and I was in shock all night last night. I didn't get any sleep. I got to bed probably around like 1:30.
Got about 3 hours last night, I think.
Adrenaline pumping and all that stuff. And I was sitting in my car, and I cried. I cried because it finally hit me that we won. And to see Jalen Hurts with the Lombardi, to see Nick Sirianni, and all the adversity that these guys have gone through with the media and just, you know, with last year and losing the Super Bowl 2 years ago and then coming back and just showing who they are, I mean, you cannot top that story.
It was the best team in the NFL from week 6 on. And I know that there was the games that didn't feel like they were going to be comfortable. Cleveland, Carolina, Jacksonville at towards the end of that game. was the best team in the NFL from week 6 on. Utter domination. And you know what the beauty about your team winning the Super Bowl is?
What's that?
It parlays right into baseball season.
That it does, baby.
Pitchers and catchers report this week. And I don't know about you, but I knew this date was coming, and it still snuck up on me because we have been so Eagles-centric, and we should be, right? The team just won their second Lombardi ever. And now instead of like flipping the page and having like that hope springs eternal feel, you just have that, let's move right on to the next thing. Now, of course, you've got the Sixers and the Flyers season. Different varying levels of feel to those two seasons. The Flyers, there's opportunistic excitement around the corner. Sixers have been like, I bang my head against that brick wall over there watching the Sixers.
I'll join you on that.
But the opportunistic feel is usually there when your NFL team underperforms or is not very good. When your NFL team wins the Super Bowl, it gets you right to spring training. And the beauty of spring training, when hope springs eternal, is that your team is undefeated. And the teams that you dislike are winless. And the thing about spring training this year for the Phillies, and I think the thing about 2025 this year for the Phillies, is the newcomers will headline stories because you know what this roster is. It was kind of built in a way that this was to be expected, that it was going to be some smaller moves, some auxiliary moves, and it was going to be an offseason that I don't think was overwhelming in any sense. So 3 names that the Phillies bring in as their big acquisition, I use in air quotes, are Jesus Luzardo, who we may or may not talk about tomorrow, Max Kepler, and Jordan Romano. So let's start with Max Kepler on today's show. Max Kepler signed a 1-year, $10 million deal this offseason, coming off an injury-plagued season. Now, I think you're going to hear me use that phrase a lot. An injury-plagued season, reclamation, rebound. Do they respond in a way that can be contributable to this Phillies team in 2025? Max Kepler's the big one for me. We'll talk about Romano, and I think Luzardo is an excellent addition to an already really, really good starting rotation. But the reason that Max Kepler, to me, is the important one of this whole situation is because I believe Max Kepler was brought in here to play nearly every day. $10 million on a 1-year deal isn't what it used to be, right? $10 million is, I don't want to say it's chump change, but in Major League Baseball, when all contracts are guaranteed, sometimes it certainly feels that way. But I think Max Kepler was brought in here to be a near everyday player and play left field more times than not, because my standing thought the whole time was going to be there was going to be a platoon in left field, and it would be Rojas getting an opportunity to be your everyday center fielder. I was proven wrong by the fact that they signed Max Kepler. I think now it's going to be a platoon in center field with Brandon Marsh and Johan Rojas and Max Kepler in left most days, especially, again, it's going to be one of those left-handed heavy lineups. So you may see 6 lefties in a lineup, 5 or 6 lefties in a lineup on any given day. But the reason I think that Max Kepler is the most important of these acquisitions in terms of expectations rising and how do they return to form is because I think when Max Kepler is at his best, he can handle being an everyday left fielder. You think about the numbers from last year. Injury-plagued season, a hip injury cost him time, and a knee injury cost him time. But you think about the numbers from last year, and they're not particularly strong. But let me take you back to 2023 for a second. And Andrew, if you can flash up the 2023 graphics on Max Kepler. Those are Max Kepler's everyday numbers as an everyday player in 2023. A 260, 332, 484 slash line, 24 home runs, 66 RBI. It's a guy who has a little bit of additional pop when he's healthy. The 41 barrels over 336 batted balls at 12% is a number that stands out to me. 47%, nearly 48% hard hit rate, and 92% exit velocity on average. But the thing that stands out to me is in 2023, Max Kepler was really, really good against fastballs. 288 average, swung and missed at only 13% of them, and 17 of his 24 home runs came off the fastball. You see his barrel rates from 23 were good. His hard hit percentage, those are the percentiles, by the way, across Major League Baseball. He was in the upper echelons of barrel rate, the upper echelons of hard hit percentage, the upper echelon, more than average of walk rate. In 2023, Max Kepler was an everyday player, and he was a above average to good everyday player. 2024, you could tell the injuries derailed his year. Let's take a look at 2024's numbers for a second. Entirely different. Now, the average doesn't dip too much, but what stands out is the slugging dropped enormously. The power was sapped. He went from 24 home runs to 8. Still drove in 42 in a more limited sample size, but the power was sapped. And it's clear. You could tell his barrel rate. He wasn't squaring balls up. He went from 12% to 6%. His hard hit rate dropped. His average exit velocity dropped. And the number there that stands out again to me, he struggled against fastballs in 2024. Average dropped 22 points. Whiff rate went up almost 10%. And the home runs decreased significantly. He didn't barrel nearly as many balls in 2024. He didn't hit nearly as many balls hard. And his strikeout rate went up. And I think people are going to see, the initial thought with Max Kepler is going to be, you're going to look at 2024. And thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it. We can bring that back now. You're going to look at 2024. And you're going to say, here's another guy with a high whiff rate because you're looking at 2024. But the numbers actually tell a different story throughout his career. Up until last year, Max Kepler was really good in limiting whiff rates and in limiting chase rates. And in fact, in 2023, I can't believe I wrote notes on paper. That's how I feel old just doing this. In 2023, he was in the 75th percentile in whiff rate. 2022, he was in the 80th. 2021, 93rd percentile. Max Kepler doesn't swing and miss a lot, with the exception of last year. And when you look at the numbers in 2023, how much can Max Kepler get that back? I think the average will be there. He'll hit somewhere in the 250 to 265 range, I think. I think the OBP will be in the low 310s. Maybe he gets to 320. But to me, it's the slugging. How much pop does he get back? And how healthy is he? Jamie Lynch always likes to talk about that there's no bad one-year deal in baseball. And I think he's right. But I will say this. You have to have a level of expectation when a guy signs for double-digit $1 million. And my level of expectation with Max Kepler is that he should be probably getting about 130, 135 games should he stay healthy as a Philly. And I asked a question on Twitter, because we're going to talk about Jordan Romano in just a second, on the PHLY Phillies account. And I put up a poll and I said, if you had to choose one of Max Kepler or Jordan Romano to bounce back in 2025 and kind of become a viable contributor to the Phillies, who are you more confident in? And there's 20 votes on this one early. 75% of you said Jordan Romano. I put it in our Discord. It's split in our Discord. And I think there's different varying reasons as to why it's split in our Discord. But the reason that I feel confident, more confident perhaps in Jordan Romano returning to form, or excuse me, Max Kepler returning to form than I do with Jordan Romano, and we'll talk about Romano's injuries in a bit. The elbow thing concerns me with Romano. Dave Dombrowski said he's throwing in the mid-80s. He's ramped it back up. They're hoping for a lot out of him. But I think with Kepler, assuming he's able to turn on the ball, assuming he's able to drive balls into the alley, have a little bit of that pop back. I'm not asking for 24 home runs necessarily, but it's probably got to be in the high teens for me to feel super comfortable. The reason I feel about that Kepler, I think, has the opportunity to bounce back is the numbers in 2024 feel like an injury outlier to me. The numbers in 2024 feel like a guy who was not comfortable at the plate. And the reason that he wasn't comfortable at the plate was because of lingering issues, a knee injury and a hip injury. I don't think he was turning on the ball particularly well. Not that I'm not going to sit here and tell you I watched 162 Twins games, but to prep for this segment and to prep for when we did an emergency pod a couple months ago, I think his swing pattern was changed because of the injury. And I think he wasn't as comfortable at the plate in 2024 as he had been in years past. All of his metrics will dictate that. All of his metrics tell you that in 2023, when he was healthy, he was driving the ball gap to gap. You take a look at his spray charts. It felt like he had a little bit more of a full spray chart in 23 than he did in his smaller sample size in 24. This, to me, feels like a candidate for a one or the other, and I'm not sure there's going to be an in-between. Kepler feels to me like a candidate of he is either going to prove to you that he is an everyday left fielder, and I think that you're going to be happier with the productivity in left field than what we maybe initially anticipated when we heard about the signing, felt it was a little bit underwhelming, or you're going to see a guy who may be towards the end of his career. Now, I think he's going to be a better defensive outfielder than he was in 24. Again, I think the injuries probably played a factor into that. But when you have Johan Rojas in center field and Brandon Marsh, now I think Brandon Marsh, we can all agree, is a better defensive left fielder than he is a defensive center fielder, but he's a good defensive center fielder. And Johan Rojas is an excellent defensive center fielder. I feel comfortable with Kepler in left. And I feel that if I am banking on one of these two guys to bounce back and return to form, I feel good about Kepler. Not over the moon excited. Not going to tell you that, I expect him to hit fifth in the lineup and drive in 90 and hit 25 home runs. But I think I've talked myself into Max Kepler more than I did when they initially signed him. And so it's going to be a wait and see approach. And I think it's going to be a wait and see approach with all of the acquisitions the Phillies have made this year. And that is, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. I think for all of us who don't want to sit through heart palpitations and wondering what if, you may want to avert your eyes until the season starts. But I think Kepler could be a candidate to have a bounce back type of season. And if he does, and he's able to hit seventh in this lineup, because to me, I still think this team is a good team offensively. I think that if he's able to hit seventh in this lineup and be surrounded by talent that this offense provides, you may see a bounce back candidate to some extent. All right, we're going to talk about Jordan Romano in just a second, and we're going to end each and every Monday with a bold prediction. And I'll explain what I mean by a bold prediction. We'll go division by division. We'll do it to end each and every Monday's episode. But first, before we do that, let me tell you about some of our friends here at PHLY. You want to talk about never ordinary? You want to talk about Bet365. You know that it is never ordinary at Bet365, and so do 90 million users worldwide. Bet365 live streams 780,000 events each and every year, and there are early payout access across each and every league. So listen, if you got in on the birds last night and you felt like you wanted to get out, well, the best thing about Bet365 is they would have cashed you out, because when it comes to NHL early opt-outs or early payouts, NFL early payouts, Bet365 would have had you covered. The birds were up by 30-plus points. You would have been able to cash out and not only enjoyed the game, but enjoyed your winnings as well. But it's not just the NFL. It's not just baseball either. Pro hoops, pro hockey, college hoops, whatever you want to get in on, Bet365 is the place to get in on it. And check this out right now. This is an amazing offer that our friends over at Bet365 are giving out right now. It's a win or lose offer that begins this week. New customers will get a $150 bonus bet when you bet $5. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. So maybe throw $5 on a long shot and see what happens. Turn some money into money and get free money on top of it. So to sign up, use the code PHLY365. All you have to do is deposit $10 and place a bet for $5 to get $150 in bonus bets, whether your bet wins or loses. Your bonus bet can be used on spreads, totals, player props, parlays, futures, and so much more. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 and older, physically located in PA. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And I saw last night, Andrew, there was a proposal on Broad Street. And if you're looking to pop the question with your significant other, I cannot express enough how much I would recommend our friends over at Golden Nugget Jeweler. Because for over 30 years, Golden Nugget Jeweler has operated at the same location. You don't stay in one spot just because, right? You stay in one spot because you're good at business and you know exactly where to find our friends at Golden Nugget Jeweler. Customers from across the country, PA, Jersey, Baltimore, New York, they've come to Golden Nugget Jeweler to find the perfect engagement ring or wedding band. So if you're looking to pop the question to your significant other, that special someone, their staff is going to be right with you. They're highly trained, they're dedicated, and they provide you a personal shopping experience. And even if you're not looking to pop the question, you just want something nice for your significant other, I just want to let you all know Valentine's Day is 4 days away. And I know the parade is going to be on Friday, and that's on everybody's minds, but don't mess up with your significant other and forget Valentine's Day just because you're excited about the parade. They have a vast selection of not just rings and bands, but also watches, jewelry, sparkling diamond necklaces, earrings, and so much more. Golden Nugget Jeweler has been a family-owned and operated business since 1987, right on the corner of Chestnut and 8th in downtown Philly. And you deserve an expert and the best price. Golden Nugget Jewelers, where Philly gets engaged. Visit goldennuggetjewelry.com today to learn more. Welcome back to the PHLY Phillies podcast here. I'm super excited to be back. Tyler Zulli, Andrew Frazier, behind the proverbial glass. We talked about Max Kepler for a little bit. Let's get into Jordan Romano for a second. Romano signed a 1-year, $8.5 million deal with the Phillies. And I think the expectation for Jordan Romano is to be a high-leverage reliever. And you notice anytime I talk about the bullpen with this Phillies team, and anytime I talk about a bullpen that's managed by Rob Thompson, I shy away from the word closer. And the reason that I shy away from the word closer is because expectations are this is a high-leverage bullpen, or it was last season. It was a high-leverage bullpen that featured Jeff Hoffman, that featured Carlos Estevez, that featured Matt Strahm, that featured Orion Kerkering. Now, two of those guys no longer pitch for the Phillies. Jeff Hoffman signed a multi-year deal. Carlos Estevez signed a multi-year deal. So the Phillies bring in Jordan Romano on a 1-year, $8 million deal, $8.5 million deal. Jordan Romano is coming off arthroscopic elbow surgery in 2024, which limited him. He really didn't pitch a whole lot in 2024. Let's talk about Jordan Romano's 2024 for a second, and then what could be because of his 2023. So, Andrew, if you could give us the 2024 numbers. He only made 15 appearances last year. 6.5 ERA. Did convert 8 saves on 15 appearances, but the numbers across the board are down. All of the good numbers are down. All of the bad numbers are up. You see the slash line, a .554 slugging percentage against Jordan Romano last year. His chase rate was down under 30%. His whiff rate was down at 24%. His strikeout rate was lower than it was in 2023. He got barreled more frequently. Again, this is a small sample size. This is 15 appearances, not a ton of innings. Only struck out less than a batter per inning, a near 1.5 whip. But all of the bad numbers are elevated and all of the good numbers are decreased compared to 2023, where he was excellent and was an all-star and made 59 appearances and posted a sub-3 ERA, and for the third consecutive season, picked up 30 or more saves. He struck out significantly more than a batter per inning, or a batter per appearance, I should say. He had 11 Ks per 9 innings pitched. He only walked 24, a 1.2 whip. You see the slash numbers, a near 200 slugging difference between 2023 and 2024. Chase rate was up, whiff rate was up, K rate was up, barrel rates were down, hard hit rates were down, exit velocity on average was down across the board. What does this tell you? Injury-plagued season once again. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that. 2023 was an excellent year for Jordan Romano, as was 22 and 21 for that matter. 2024 was an injury-plagued season. Again, I'm going to use the word rebound, bounce back, return to form, reclamation project. You name it, you tell me what you want to say about Jordan Romano, and those are the words that you're going to come up with. Here's my question with Jordan Romano, and it's not necessarily fair to him. This is more of a question for the Phillies than it is about Jordan Romano, because we know the stuff is there. Slider, fastball overlay, used the slider about 54% of the time last year, and probably about the same in 2023. Here's my question, and this is really more directed to the Phillies than it is to Jordan Romano specifically. The Blue Jays need bullpen help. They were the second worst bullpen in team ERA in 2024. Only Colorado was worse, and Colorado had one of the worst pitching staffs I've ever seen in the history of baseball. It was disgusting how bad Colorado was, and only Colorado's bullpen had a worse ERA than the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays were also the second worst ninth inning ERA team in baseball, which means they were giving up a lot of runs late in games, and due in part, partially to Jordan Romano, partially to the casting crew that they were trying to run out to secure games. It didn't work for them. The only team that was worse, again, was Colorado. They gave up the most home runs out of a bullpen in 2024. It's safe to say the bullpen in the ninth inning specifically for the Toronto Blue Jays last year was a disaster. They also had kind of a mass exodus of relievers over the last 12 months. Jordan Romano's now gone. Yenesis Cabrera signed a minor league deal. That would have been a guy I was interested in just because of stuff on a similar minor league deal with an invite to camp. They traded Jimmy Garcia at the deadline, and he re-signs this offseason. But they traded him to Seattle at the deadline because they weren't going anywhere, and their bullpen got worse when they traded Garcia. So here's my question. Knowing what I just laid out to you about how bad the bullpen was in 2024, why would the Blue Jays not tender Jordan Romano? Why did they decide that the monetary investment on a tendered contract was not enough to try to keep him in on the, have exclusive negotiating rights with Romano before he hit unrestricted free agency? Well, I think in part it's due to a money question, right? Romano signed for $8.5 million. And I think the Blue Jays were hesitant to give out any kind of money of significance because they were in on the Juan Soto sweepstakes, because they were in on the Roki Sasaki sweepstakes. Now, that money wasn't huge because it's a minor league deal, but the Blue Jays were nominally in on every large free agent that you could, right? You thought of Blake Snell, you thought of Soto, all of these names that ended up signing elsewhere. You would hear the Blue Jays are interested because they have money to spend. And quite frankly, Toronto is at the end of their rope, I think, with this current core. Vladdy's an impending free agent next year. Bo Bichette had a down year. They had too good of a pitching staff, again, nominally, to have, at least in a starting rotation, to have such a bad year. They end up trading Yusei Kikuchi at the deadline, who then signs in LA this offseason. So my question is, why did the Blue Jays non-tender him? Again, monetarily speaking, I think that's part of it, but I think it could also just be a medical thing. Like when you have a significant arthroscopic surgery in your elbow like Jordan Romano did, he did it while he was a Blue Jay, right? So if there's any team that knows the medical history and the medical progression of Jordan Romano, it's the team that he was on when he got that surgery. Does that scare them away? It's certainly plausible. The Phillies said he passed his physical, and the Phillies said that, they're feeling good and confident. Again, Dave Dombrowski said he's in the mid-90s. His throwing routine feels good. But if a team feels like they've got a guy internally, especially when their bullpen's a disaster that they could use, and he not only doesn't resign, he gets non-tendered and basically cast aside, that raises a little bit of red flags for me. And so my question is, stuff-wise versus can he return to form? Because stuff-wise, Jordan Romano's stuff is nasty. High 90s fastball, good slider overlay. A phrase you're going to hear me use a lot is tunneling. I think he hides the ball well, and it parlays into his ability to tunnel the baseball well. So all of these things being said, the question becomes, does he return to form, or is this the conversation piece of like a guy like Corey Knebel? I think of when the Phillies signed Corey Knebel. Knebel had great stuff, not as good as Romano's. I think Romano's stuff is better than Knebel's. But Knebel had good stuff in Milwaukee, had a slew of injuries. The Phillies signed him, and he just really never came back to form. And eventually the Phillies ended up moving him out of the closer role, and he kind of became a forgotten man. I think, in fact, they may have DFA'd him at the end of the season. I don't want to say that I think that that's comparable to what Romano is now, but that's where the question arises. And so to me, if you're asking a guy to be a high-leverage reliever, which I assume that they're going to do, I think from the right-hand side, it's going to be Romano and Kerkering, and from the left-hand side, it's going to be Strom and Alvarado as your high-leverage guys. He's going to get, situational innings that are important, that mean something, especially early in the year. They're going to let him run out there and see what he can do. I don't think they're going to overload him with work, but I do think that they're going to see, let's test the waters a little bit. 3-run lead in the bottom of the ninth, use Romano. I think he's going to be the early leader in the clubhouse to be the closer, right? But with that being said, that is kind of my overlying concern with Jordan Romano. I think this is one of those signings that I think we're going to know probably by the midpoint of June whether Jordan Romano has anything at all. And if he's pitching well, then they're going to continue to use him in high leverage situations. And if he's not, it could end up being one of those DFA at the end of July type of situations. I think that I lean a little bit more towards the stuff, but my concerns are there. I'm not going to try to freak anybody out, but I think if you're asking me between the two, Kepler's the one to me that I'm holding my breath on to be kind of a larger portion of this team. If both pan out to fruition, this is going to be an excellent team again. It's going to be an excellent team regardless. But I think if you get a guy in the back end of your bullpen that you trust, and especially against righties, as Jordan Romano would do, and then a guy as your everyday left fielder that you trust is towards the bottom portion of the lineup, that's significant and will go a long way. But if you're asking me right now on February 10th to pick one, I think I would probably pick Kepler. Now, one final thing before we get out of here. I do want to talk about our bold predictions in the AL West. And I do want to say thank you to everybody that is hanging out with us today on Roku and all of our streaming platforms. Head on over to allphly.com to watch the remainder of the show. I do want to tell you about a deal that we have going on because we talked about the Eagles at the beginning of the show. We have two deals going on right now. First and foremost, some incredible shirts and merch for you to purchase on allphly.com. We are calling it our Gold Standard Collection. Jeffrey Lurie used that phrase a long time ago, and now that they've got two, and they've been back to two in 3 years and 3 in 8 years, it's starting to feel a little bit more like a Gold Standard organization. So get involved with some of the PHLY Gold Standard Collection. You can get something as simple as the Bird shirt with now 2 Lombardi trophies on it. You got World Bleepin' Champs in there, World Champions 2017 and 2024. Head on over to allphly.com and you can check that out. You can also, for the next 36 hours, become a diehard at a discounted rate. For the next 36 hours only, $48 gets you in on a yearly subscription to become a PHLY diehard. You get all the great written content. Charlie O'Connor, Kyle Neubeck, Zach Berman, Bo Wolf, Les Bowen. I don't want to miss anybody, but we have some incredible writers here at All PHLY. And of course, you'll get your merch. You get access to events, all of that. And of course, you'll get in on the Discord that we call the PHLY Lounge. So for the next 36 hours, we do have a $48 for a full year. I mean, you're talking about $4 a month. If you want to do it out, the math out that way, $4 a month for some excellent content. All right, one final segment before we get out of here, and we're going to do this quickly. What I wanted to do as we get closer and closer to the beginning of spring training, we have about a month and a half until the season starts, which again is crazy to me because the NFL season for us as Eagles fans just ended last night, and the party will continue this week. Each Monday as we get into spring training, I want to talk about one bold prediction for each division. And so, unfortunately, we're going to save the NL East for last because you can't break a former radio guy into teasing a segment anymore. But let's start with the American League West. I'm going to give you one bold prediction for each division on each Monday to wrap up a show, and that will lead us pretty perfectly into the beginning of the Major League Baseball season. So, my bold prediction for the American League West, and by the way, I want you to hold me to this. Andrew, hold me accountable throughout the season. You can tell me you're an idiot or, hey, great pick, Tyler.
I'm writing it down right now.
So my bold prediction for the American League West, and I'm going to put a caveat on this, is I'm not going to go as bold to say that they do make the postseason. But I think my bold prediction is that the Sacramento, Oakland, Las Vegas, Traveling Wanderers Athletics will be a playoff contender for a majority of the season. Now, I want to take you back to last year for a second. The Kansas City Royals took the MLB by storm when they won 30 games more than they did a season prior. They won 58 games in 2023. They won 88 games in 2024 and became the third team ever to make the playoffs the year after losing 100 games. How did they do it? Now, here's the part that the A's don't quite have yet. They have a guy named Bobby Witt Jr. He's freaking awesome at baseball. He's one of my favorite players in the league. He ascended to superstardom last year, led the American League in hits, led the American League in batting average, and finished second in the American League Cy Young. So that's something that the A's don't have is a Bobby Witt Jr. But what they also did was go out and spend money in free agency for the first time in what felt like forever. They signed Michael Wacha, and more importantly, they signed Seth Lugo, who finished second in the Cy Young voting. I don't think the A's are going to finish second in the Cy. They're not going to have Luis Severino is not going to be that guy. They signed Luis Severino to a deal. I don't think Severino is going to finish second in the Cy Young voting like Seth Lugo did. So they don't have that either. So this makes me feel like it's Kansas City light, and that's why I don't think they get over the finish line and make the playoffs. But I do think the A's are going to be a very competitive team this year. And it starts with, to me, their additions, which are good. Luis Severino, as I mentioned, traded for Jeffrey Springs, who I believe is going to be in the rotation. And they add Jose Leclerc to shore up their bullpen a little bit. Mason Miller is one of the most electric relievers in baseball. And the two guys that really kind of pushed me into this conversation, one got into the conversation last year as a star. It's Brent Rooker. Brent Rooker is an excellent ball player with a ton of pop. And I've seen bold predictions where he might get 40. People are saying he might hit 45 or 50 home runs this year. But the guy, to me, the catalyst, the straw that stirs the drink for this A's team this season is going to be Lawrence Butler. Butler emerged last year as a guy who can be an everyday player and was excellent. Finished with an over 3 WAR. You know I don't care a lot about WAR, but finished with an over 3 WAR despite the fact that he only played in 125 games last year. He's got pop. He hits to all fields. He's able to run the bases well. He's an all-around excellent player. And to me, Lawrence Butler is the guy that I think will elevate this team the most, paired with Brent Rooker. I think it's conceivable this team has 3 All-Stars this year. Because I think Mason Miller should be in at this point, assuming he has another year like he did. And Rooker and Butler may not be too far behind. I don't think this team's going to end up crossing the threshold of 86, because I believe that's what it was to make the playoffs last year in the American League as a wildcard team. I don't think they're going to win an additional 30 games. But is it conceivable to say they win another 10 or 12 or 14 games than they did last year? Because 12 gets you to 81 and 81. 14 gets you to 83 and 79. Any more than that, and you're starting to talk about a team that's in postseason contention. I think they probably falter late because their pitching's not excellent just yet. But I think that the A's are done being the doormat of the American League West. And I think they're done being the laughingstock of the American League and Major League Baseball for that matter. Now, the question is, will they spend money if they have a good year in the 2026 offseason? Remains to be seen. 162 games is a long time away. But my bold prediction for the American League West is that the Sacramento Athletics will be a much more difficult team to beat in 2025, and I think they might contend for a playoff spot until the very end. Half an hour goes fast. And in fact, we had an extra bonus 6 minutes because of it. Thank you so much for everybody that tuned into the conversation. I'm gonna tell you this, everybody that's in the chat. Thank you so much to Pat Ryan, Barbara Carroll, K Red, Joe Fisher, James Bond Flyers. I'm gonna do a much better job as this goes on of acknowledging the chat and recognizing the chat. That is a fatal flaw of mine when I host shows. I just zone out sometimes. I see all of you. I appreciate all of you. I'm thankful for all of you. Thank you for coming along back on this first show. We'll be back on Friday with a live show, Friday, 1 o'clock. We'll talk to Jim Salisbury. I'm going to try to line up some extra content creators and some extra beat writers. In between, we'll have some incredible well, I shouldn't say incredible. That's kind of tooting my own horn too much. Let's say exciting content on the way in between. I'll tweet it out from the PHLY Phillies account. I'll tweet it out from my personal account. And I'll make sure to put it in the Discord as well. We'll talk a little bit about a pitcher this week. We'll talk about the pitching staffs across Major League Baseball and have some fun with trivia. So first and foremost, thank you to Andrew Frazier for producing today's show. I am greatly appreciative of you as always.
Anytime.
Thank you to everybody who tuned in. And of course, thank you to everybody here at PHLY for launching this thing once again. We'll be back live on Friday, but in the meantime, enjoy some of the content coming up. Oh yeah, and by the way, go Birds. We'll talk to you on Friday.
We all silly like the mayor.